Welcome to the What is Stoicism podcast.
Despite some common misconceptions, the goal of practicing Stoicism is not to become an emotionless statue, impervious to all mental impressions. Rather, the aim is to cultivate a mind that does not automatically give assent or attach unnecessary opinions to every impression that arises. Even the perfect Stoic cannot prevent the involuntary reactions to sudden or frightening stimuli, and indeed, we shouldn't expect to train ourselves out of such natural, instinctive responses, nor would it be natural to do so. The ancient Stoic teacher Epictetus explains this with striking clarity in a fragment from the 5th book of his Discourses, pointing out that certain impressions are simply out of our hands. These initial appearances, he says, force themselves upon our attention by a power of their own. But what happens next is entirely within our control. We can choose whether or not to agree with them. Quote, "Things that appear to the mind, that is, things by which our consciousness is immediately struck, as soon as it has an image of something that gets through to the mind, are neither subject to our will nor up to us, but force themselves by a certain power of their own upon our attention. However, assents, whereby these impressions are identified, are subject to our will and up to us." End quote. This is where the core of Stoic training lies. Although a sage's mind may be moved a little by certain rapid and unconscious motions, those sudden shocks that temporarily bypass the rational faculty, the wise person still retains the capacity to examine these impressions and form a measured judgment about them. Where the untrained mind might flinch and immediately accept an impression as true, the Stoic withholds assent, scrutinizes the fear or anxiety, and then either rejects it or accepts it for what it is, and no more. This process is not about denying the fact that our hearts may race or our faces may pale when startled. Instead, it's about not becoming enslaved to these reflexive reactions. As Epictetus says, the difference between a fool and a sage is that the fool sees something frightening, assumes that it really is terrifying, and reacts in a way that gives the fear more power than it deserves. The sage, by contrast, experiences the same initial shock, but quickly withholds assent, refusing to let that impression bloom unchecked into a full-blown panic. Another Stoic, Seneca, in his 13th letter to Lucilius, echoes this same principle when he addresses the age-old problem of groundless fears, those anxieties we conjure out of uncertainty. Tellingly, the letter is titled On Groundless Fears, and its wisdom is just as relevant now as it was 2 millennia ago. We let ourselves drift with every breeze, Seneca writes. We're frightened at uncertainties just as if they were certain. When we drift with every breeze, we surrender our mental sovereignty to mere rumours, appearances, or idle speculation. Epictetus too laments this casual abandonment of our most precious possession, our mind. He asks us to imagine how absurd it would be to hand our physical body over to any passer-by's care. Yet we routinely do something worse when we allow our minds to be unsettled by careless words, unfounded rumours, or the idle chatter of others. Quote, "If someone gave your body into the keeping of a passer-by, you'd be furious. But you give your mind into the keeping of any random person, so that if he maligns you, it becomes troubled and confused. Doesn't this make you feel ashamed?" End quote. Seneca's advice is clear. Do not accept every impression as true. Test your fears. Examine your anxieties. Much of what disturbs us has more to do with our untested assumptions than with reality itself. Yes, my dear Lucilius, Seneca writes, we agree too quickly with what people say. We do not put to the test those things which cause our fear. We do not examine into them. He likens us to soldiers panicking over a dust cloud, kicked up by stampeding cattle, mistaking harmless illusions for mortal threats. Rumours and worries unsettle us precisely because we fail to examine them. Unchecked, our imagination fills in the blanks with terrifying possibilities. Truth has its own definite boundaries, Seneca reminds us, but that which arises from uncertainty is delivered over to guesswork and the irresponsible license of a frightened mind. The Stoic antidote is not to suppress fear, but to interrogate it. Fear becomes manageable when we remember that our mind is our command center, our domain. We alone get to decide whether an impression deserves assent. We weigh our fears and our hopes with equal care, and when in doubt, we give ourselves the benefit of that doubt. As Seneca says, weigh carefully your hopes as well as your fears, and whenever all the elements are in doubt, decide in your own favour. Believe what you prefer, and if fear wins a majority of the votes, incline in the other direction anyhow, and cease to harass your soul. Returning to Epictetus, we find the same prescription. Our involuntary first reaction is merely an alarm bell, not the fire itself. The initial impression is simply a message that something might need our attention. The Stoic doesn't ignore it. They investigate it. Only through rational examination can we expose the appearance for what it truly is, often harmless, frequently misleading, and certainly not worthy of blind panic. So the Stoic path is neither about brute suppression of our natural reflexes, nor about passive acceptance of every feeling that flits through the mind. It's about cultivating the steady habit of mindful assent, the choice to examine, test, and judge each impression before allowing it to shape our inner life. In this way, fear loses its power to dominate us, rumours lose their power to enslave us, and we stand guard over our minds with the same fierce vigilance we would devote to our bodies, refusing to drift with every breeze or tremble at every shadow. This is the practice: to greet each impression with a calm, critical eye, to withhold assent until reason has done its work, and to remain in all things the master of our own thoughts.